Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Yud Daled in Bava Kama. So you learn for a Chanukah basis on the Cinema Tzara of Shivya. And it says the Gemara about the sixth line down on the page. Yesterday we had the sheet, we had Machlok between Rav Chisda and Rav Lazar. Let's say you're in the rishus of a nizik and a mazik. They both have mazik and the nizik both have rishus to be there, and the mazik animal is eats some fruits that belong to the nizik, or he damages with his feet. So Rav Chisda said that you're chayav on shein v'regel there, and Rav Lazar says you're patur on shein v'regel there. If it's the rishus that's designated for the mazik and the nizik, then they're both entitled to be there. So the mazik is patur. So we had this machlokas. So the Gemara is now asking on Rav Lazar, who says you're patur. See, is it really a machlokas or not? Is it really said Rav Lazar says that if it's a rishus and a nizik and a mazik, that the masik is patur there if he did damage with shein v'regel. But Tan Rabbi Yosef chatzar belongs to partners or pundik or an inn, like a place where a lot of people can hang out, and they're both entitled to be there. Chayiv ben al shein v'regel, you're chayiv there on shein v'regel. Tifta Rav Lazar, Sakash Rav Lazar. This is a proof to Rav Chisda. Amach Rav Lazar v'Tizbar. I'll ask you: is that shita unanimous? V'Tizbar masnisa mi lo pliyid. There's a machlokas in the brisa about this halacha. By the time you learn Arba Klaus Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer, he said four general categories about these cases of nizik. It depends where you are. What do we mean? Four different places, four rules. Kosher was just the nizik below the mazik chayav bakol. If this is the nizik, the one who was damaged, if this is his property, then the mazik is chayav on anything. Shein v'regel, even keren, he's chayav there too. Now the thing about keren, we'll talk about shein v'regel is only chayav in the nizik's property. Karen, which is not normal for an animal to do damage, that's why he's a tam the first three times. There you're chayiv even rishus harabim. But if it's in the rishus of the nizik, chayiv bakol, the Gemara is going to say later on, chayiv bakol, you're chayiv not for chatzi nezek. If the Karen does damage in the nizik's properties, chayiv for everything, just like shein v'regel. We'll see that's lashon of bakol, but still kosher rishus of nizik. If it's a rishus nizik, you can say, Masik, what are you doing in my property? You come in my property, you bring your animal in my property, you're chayav on everything. The Masik, well, let's say it's the Masik's rishus. My animal did damage to your animal or ate something, you brought some fruits into my yard. I don't have to pay for anything. Who asked you? You had no permission to come into my yard. The Masik, well, nizik, pater bakol, you're putting everything. Lezev is that. Okay, here's what we're talking about, where the Masik and the nizik both have rishus. For them, it's a rishus harabim. For both of them, they both have permission to be there. Lazel lezek, could go on chatzar shutman, or a bika, or a valley. Notice here he says valley. Before, when he said chatzar shutman, he says like compared it to a pundik in Rabbi Yosef's brisa. He said chatzar shutman va pundik chayiv ben al shein v'regel. Here we see chatzar shutman va bika pater ben al shein v'regel, right? And your shein v'regel you're pater entirely. But now why you're pater entirely? Because the Masik had rishus to be there too. It's not like he went into somebody else's rishus. What about on Karen, which is negicha either goring or negifa pushing, or shicha biting, or ravitza kicking, or ravitza is like falling. If he fell on the animal, like purposely fell on top of another animal or did damage to some property there, alabita or kicking, tam misham chatzin nesek, mur misham nesek shalim, which is the regular rule for a Karen rishus harabim. Since they both have rishus to be there, and the animal did it intentionally, is chayiv, and like we said, the tam pays half, and the mu'id pays the entire length. So that's if they both have rishus to be there. But what do you see? This is the proof to Rabbi Lazar. If they both have rishus to be there, they're patur on shein v'regel. On Karen, you're chayiv there, right? Because it's like rishus harabim. The last case, the last general category is lo lezeh v'lo lezek. It doesn't belong to them. It doesn't belong to them. Who does it belong to? It actually it belongs to one of them. Then chayiv b'al belongs to the nizik. Chayiv b'al shein v'regel. On shein v'regel you're chayiv because that's the nizik rishus. This really sounds like the first case, but we'll see what the difference is later on. And on a negicha, neshicha, negifa, barisa labita, tam sham chatzin nesek shalom tani mias. But lemaisa you see in the third case. Chatzar shutman va'bika. If it belongs to both, they both have rishus to be there. Pater b'al shein v'regel kasha dari. So there's a steer in the two brises. The brisa of Yosef says if they both have rishus to be there, you're chayiv on shein v'regel, and here you say you're pater. So Rabbi Lazar has proof to his case from the second brisa. But what do you do with the two brises are in steer of one another, contradicting one another? We're at the first of the wide lines on Yudala Manal. Kasha Dari. The answer is Kitanya hi b'chotzer michedes l'zeh u'lezeh. That's speaking about a chotzer, right? Kitanya b'chotzer michedes bein leperes v'mishvarim. I'll tell you what. This last brisa is speaking about where they both had permission to be there, both to put their animals in there and their fruits there. In other words, this is a chutzner that Reuben and Shimon were both entitled to use, the mazik and the nizik, and they're entitled to store goods there, the fruits there that animals would eat, and they're entitled to keep their animals there. So how can you say that the mazik is chayiv in a case like that if this animal ate something or stepped on something? They both had permission to bring their animals in there and to put the fruits in there. The mazik can't be chayiv there. Ahud Rav Yosef, this or Rav Yosef who says that you're chayiv and shein bregel, the chutz micheres leperes. They're both entitled to keep their fruits there, but not entitled to micheres l'shvarim. No dogs allowed, as we say. No oxen allowed. You could have a yard. We both have like a sort of a nursery here. We keep flowers and fruits and vegetables and things like that, a garden. But you can't bring animals in here. Animals are going to destroy everything. That's what Rav Yosef is speaking about. In that case, the mazik is chayiv because he had no permission to bring his animal in there. Not a big chiddush. Not a big chiddush. No, nobody's okay. Not a big chiddush. Not a big chiddush. But he's explaining the rules. These are the four categories. Reb Shimon Elazar explained the four categories. And Reb Yosef, when he was speaking about, it says Yechayev when they both had permission to be there. It's speaking about where they both had permission to be there, but not to bring your animal in. If they both have permission to bring their animals in, then you're potter and shein bregel. Gabi shein have the chotzar and nizik. You see this difference also between the two brises. We're trying to explain that the two brises are not in contradiction with one another. Here, in the case of Rabbi Yosef, what did he say? There, because we're talking about something that belongs to both of them, or a pundik. A pundik is an inn. Most good hotels don't allow oxen to come in. They might allow cats and dogs, but they don't allow oxen to come in there. That's what you're talking about, a place where you wouldn't allow animals to come in. Pardon? Oh, so Karen you're chayiv anyway, because Karen is Mushura, you're chayiv even when you're allowed to have your animal there, like Mushus Ram, you're still chayiv if he does damage, because the animal did damage on purpose. It's not normal for him to do damage, he did damage on purpose. So the pundik. In the case where you're potter, the second brisa, where Rabbi Elazar was bringing a proof to him from the second brisa, where he said, you're potter shem bregel, a bika valley, right? That's a place where you can bring anything in a big valley. You could bring, fruits, vegetables, animals. Everybody roams around there. In a case like that, where they both had permission to bring their animals and their fruits in there, he's potter and shein bregel. You see, maskef flor of zera, even the michares leperes. I understand if it's designated only for fruits, so how is it tzarich habin and beer b'steyacher v'leka? It's not steyacher. Anybody can bring their fruits in there, right? They both have permission to bring their fruits in there. So why is that steyacher? Shein bregel's only chayiv if it did damage in the other guy's property. Here they both have permission. Abaye answered since it's not designated for animals. Animals are not out there. Steyacher. But as far as animals goes, it's steyacher. In other words, it's your property as far as you have permission to bring your fruits and vegetables and flowers and things like that in there, but you have no permission for bringing your animals in. So if you brought your animal in there, even though you have a lease together with the mazik and the nizik mazik both have a lease, they can use that property, but he can't bring his animals in there. So if you brought your animals in there, that is considered steyachet. That's a biased answer. Since you're saying these two brises are not in contradiction. In other words, where you have a chutzner which both the mazik and the nizik can use. In one case, Rabbi Yosef says if the mazik does damage, shein bregel is chayiv. That's why, because you weren't allowed to bring your animals in there, and therefore he's chayiv. And the second case where the mazik is potter is because he was allowed to bring his animals in there. So since there's no steer between the brises, maybe Rav Chisda and Rav Elazar that we learned yesterday are also not in disagreement. You're right. Maybe they're not. If you say that you think that there is a machlokus in that case, they're arguing in this last kasha that Rav Zera and Abai were talking about, meaning in a case where he had permission for bring your fruits in there, but not your animals. That's what Rashi explains. Rashi right before the lines get wide. If this chutzner, this courtyard or whatever, this field was set aside for fruits but not for animals, Rav Chisda goes like Abaye. So since it's not Yuchadis V'Amis Stadar Acher Karita, but that's why he says you're Chayiv. And Rav Lozer goes like Rav Zera, since the Masik is vicious to be there, maybe it's not Stadar Acher, and therefore you're Potter. In other words, if you say it's a Machlokas, or maybe the Machlokas is in this case where you have permission for your fruits, but not for your animals. Gufa Amr Klos Hayub Shem Blazer. Blazer said that there are four categories, meaning four really areas of difference, and when we can apply the rules of Nezikin, the rules of the Shane, Paregal, and Carrot. Right? Any time that it's only rishus for the nizik and not the mazik. In other words, the mazik has no permission to come to the other guy's rishus. Reuben is not allowed. Reuben is the mazik. Shimon's the nizik. Reuben has no permission to go into Shimon's rishus if he does any damage there. Chayiv bakol. Ala kol loktan. He didn't say chayiv on everything, whether it's Shane, regular, carrying. He says chayiv bakol. Why is bakol? Chayiv to pay in full. El chayiv bakol bekuli nizik. Goes like nizik. Machlokes later on in the Gemara. Money or time from the Amr Mishunakim. We said that Karen pays half, right? Pays half the first 3 times he's a tam, and a mu'id pays nezik sholem. But that's only in Rosh Hashanah. But if you took your animal into somebody else's property, you had no permission to be there at all. Tarfin says you got to pay the full amount. I don't care if he's a Karen. I don't care what he is. He has no business over here. It says Mishuna Karen b'chotzer anizik. Mishuna Karen means that Karen is an unusual thing. Why? Because Rashi, in the second of the wide lines, Rashi says, Karen tam chotel daseh, Karen tam of an animal that's not a mu'ed yet, and all kori mishun. In other words, whether it pushes or kicks or whatever, it's called mishun. It's called unusual. Hol v'shines vesta and shlo yedakach. The animals don't normally go around kicking and pushing and things like that. Oxen don't usually do that. That's what he calls that unusual. So Tarfon says, the Mishuna Karen, he's not saying that Karen's different over here, he's saying that the unusual Karen in a Chatzar and Nezik Shalom Mishlam pays the entire amount, not Chatzi Nezik like in Rosh Hashanah. If he's in somebody else's property, he's pay the full amount. That's what Tarfon Shikra Rabbanan disagree. So over here, the Lashon of Shimon Elazar, when he said in the first of the 4 general categories that he said, that if it's the Rosh Hashanah Nezik, you're Chayiv Bakol, not Alakol, whether it's Shane, Regel, Karen, whatever, but Chayiv Bakol means you have to pay the whole amount. You have to pay the whole amount because it goes like Rav Tarfon, who says that Karen that normally pays half when it's a tam, that's only Shesharam, but not Chatzar and Nizik. So the first part goes like Rav Tarfon, aim a sefer, look at the sefer. The last case, Lo Lazev or Lo Lazev, we said if let's say neither one, Lo Lazev is it's not a property, it belongs to both of them. Lo Lazev, Lo Lazev. Could go in Chatzar Shein Shoshan, Chatzar doesn't belong to both of them. You're Chayiv Bala Shein Lo, you're Chayiv there in Shein Bregel. And what does that mean? My Lo Lazev, Lo Lazev. What does it mean, Lo Lazev? Ilay Lo Lazev, Lo Lazev, Klal El Da'acher belongs to some third party. So, but being a B'Yabas De'acher, V'Leka. You have to do, in order for you to be Chayiv, you have to do damage to somebody, to this guy, in somebody else's in that other guy's property. In other words, Reuben has to go into Shimon's property and do damage. That's when he's Chayiv on Shein Bregel. If Reuben and Shimon are both in a third party, they're both invited to somebody else's house, right? They're both there with permission. That's like a Rosh Hashanah. Shein Bregel's potter there. So what do you mean? Lo Lazev, you're Chayiv on Shein Bregel? What does that mean? Why are you Chayiv on Shein Bregel? If it's Lo Lazev, that means nobody's. It means some third party. So why are you Chayiv there over like El Pshita Lo Lazev El Dachai? It means that it's not a designated property for this one, for Reuben and Shimon, only for one of them, meaning for the Nizik. Viktani Sefer, Tam Misham Chatzi Nezik, Umur Misham Nezik Shalom. Even though it's the Nizik's property, the Sefer says that for Karen, Tom pays half, pays Chatzi Nezik, and Mur pays Nezik Shalom. That goes like Rabban Aslan Rabbanan. Again, the first part of Rav Shimon's, the first category, when he says Bakol is mashma, that if the Karen does damage in the Nizik Rishus, he pays the full amount. And here in the last case, mashma only pays half. Aslan Rabbanan. The rabbi said Mishun Karen b'Chatzar Nizik. The unusual Karen b'Chatzar Nizik, Chatzi Nezik to Mishan. Rabbanan say that Karen pays Chatzi Nezik no matter where he is, Rosh Hashanah or even in Rosh Hashanah. We're going to see that machlokes later on. But the problem we have here is that according to Shimon Elazar's categories, the first case goes like a Tarfon, the last case goes like a Rabbanan. Ratio of Tarfon say Rabbanan. More say Enachanami. Normally Shmuel or Yehuda, Shmuel told his student Rav Yehuda, Shimon, a smart kid. Shvok Masnisim, so don't try to set the Mishnah, don't try to set this like a Mishnah meaning with all one Shita. Tabas Rai, follow me that I say the first part goes like Rav Tarfon, the second part goes like Rabbanan. Ratio of Tarfon, the Sefer Rabbanan. Okay, so this machlokas we'll see later on about Karen B'Shus HaNizik, does it pay Nezik Sholem or Chatzi Nezik? Rabbeinu Mishmeid Rav Amar, Kulur Tarfin. You could really say that the whole cases go like Tarfin. Umay lo lezev. We said last case, how could go Tarfin? How could you pay Chatzi Nezik? Umay lo lezev lepeiros. For peiros, it only belongs to the nizik. Or the chad. Lezev l'shmarim l'gavi shein haveli chatzar nizik l'gavi karen avishus rabim. So he says that's a weird answer. He says lo lezev doesn't belong to both of them. But lo lezev doesn't belong to both of them. My lo lezev lepeiros el the chad. For peiros doesn't belong to both of them. It only belongs to the nizik. So if he does damage, and if again, that's like the case we discussed before. If you bring your animal into a field that you're both for payers, only one person's allowed to be there. They're both allowed to have their animals there, but only one guy's allowed to have his payers there. Right? There's a chazar and nizik. Why? Because you have to know permission to have your fruits in there, and only he has permission for his fruits. So therefore, it's his chazar for payers. And if your animal went in there and did damage, yes, it's still chazar and nizik, and you have to pay the whole amount. Legabe Shane have the chotzer and nizik, and therefore you have to pay. Shane pays the full amount. Legabe Karen, since he has permission to be there, haveli rishus harabim, and therefore he only pays half. It's a weird case, right? So the Gemara says Yihachi arba shloshavi. Both these cases, like Avram asked before, you could see in the first cases. What's the chiddush over here? Why do you have for this 4 different cases? If the last case is speaking about that Shane is b'chotzer and nizik, because only the nizik has rishus to have his payers there. So only he has rishus. It's chotzer and nizik for him, and therefore Shane and Regal would pay the full amount. But they both have permission to have their animals in there. So as far as Karen goes, since they both have permission, it's like rishus harabim. So like Rashi explains in the last 2 lines in Rashi, there's only 3 categories. Why? The high klal basra. You hear from the first case. We already learned kosher rishus and nizik below the mazik chayev bakol. The Karen b'chatzar ashutkan also hatan l'reish go chatzar ashutkan mabika and he chav the gave tamsham chatzanesk. In other words, this last category we already saw from the first and the third categories. What do you need this for at all? You're right. There's only 3 categories. There's basically a category rishus hamazik, or rishus hanizik, or rishus for both of them. And those are the rules where it goes to both of them. Rishus for both of them, then they're potter, like you said in the 3rd case, where rishus for both of them like a bicker. You're potter bal shein beregel, and you're chayev on Karen because that's like rishus harabim for both of them. I wanted to discuss something that we brought up yesterday, but we don't have time to really discuss it now. But we'll get to it. It's really on Shabbos stuff because Michael brought up yesterday about chatzi nezik. Chatzi nezik you pay from the goof of the animal, but you could pay from the entire bus of the animal. Let's say you had an animal that was worth 20 shekels, right? And it destroyed an animal that was worth 1,000 shekels, right? So you have to pay chatzi nezik, right? So the chatzi nezik is half, right? But you would pay if all the animal's worth is 20 shekels, so you would take the whole animal. The discussion yesterday was about the emur. I think we weren't clear about. I wasn't correct when I explained it correctly. Yeah, the emur amount. You have to. I consider it in Rashi's case was a little bit hard to understand, but we'll talk about it more in the next few days because the Gemara is going to get into that. Okay. Says the Mishnah. Now this Mishnah is really like a continuation of the Mishnah in Testament Bays because he tells you all the rules that we said about Karen, Karen, whether it's Karen, Shane, Bregel, all these rules, Aish and Bor. We said if I'm chayiv to watch it, I prepared its nezek and I'm responsible. If I finished the whole nezek, I'm chayiv for the whole nezek, right? We said that. The chasum shein b'meila. Okay, I'm only chayiv on things that have no meila, right? No meila, but that excludes according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that excludes kachim kalam, which there is no meila, and therefore if you damage kachim kalam, you would have to pay. And the chasam and we said also you're in chayiv on Jewish property and property that belongs to somebody. If it didn't belong to anybody, you can't. If you damaged, or if we said it, even if something of hefker, an animal of hefker damaged you, and then somebody acquired it, the time that he did the damage, didn't belong to somebody, so you can't go after him. And you're chayev b'chol makom chutz mirshus miucheres l'masek. Again, if the plaintiff, the damaged person, If he got hurt, but he wasn't where he was supposed to be, he came into Rishus Mazik. He can't have any claim. Rishus Nizik Mazik, that was the machlokas we had now between Rav Chisda and Rav Lazar, or maybe it's explained away. If they're both entitled to be there, it depends on the circumstances. What are they allowed to bring in there? And you have to pay out of the best. And we said that either comes to include Karen according to Shmuel, or comes to include the case of the Shomer. Now this Mishnah tells you other things. In each case, these are all different phrases, but you don't understand the phrase until you see the Gemara. That's what we've had for the last 5 days, and now we'll see more of this now. This Mishnah says, Shum Kesef. It's got to be assessed, right? You have an assessment. What does that mean? An assessment. Of course you have an assessment. What does that mean? We'll see what it's coming to exclude. Shava Kesef, the value of money. You don't pay the money, but you pay the value of money. What does that mean? We'll see. The Fnei Pes has got to be in front of a court. Al Pi Edom, it's got to be Edom, B'nei Chorin, B'nei Bris. The Edom have to be free men, right? Not slaves, and Jewish people. Okay, what does that come to exclude? We'll explain. Women are also included in these rules. Makes them men or women. Both the nizik and the mazik partake in the tashlumin. Now, what do you mean the nizik partakes in the tashlumin? The nizik has to pay. He was one who was damaged. So we said, we'll see the Gemara about that. For example, if the animal that did the damage was a tom, right? So the nizik is only entitled to half of the damage. If the damage was $1,000, he's only entitled to 500. If the mazik's animal, that's another thing we said, the mazik's animal is only worth 200, that's all you'll get. The point is then that the nizik partakes in the damages. It's like we call, what do we have that today? We have that the deductible. What is an deductible? If you have damage to your car, right, you have to deductible means you have to pay for part of it too. The insurance company always pay for part of it. Part of it you have to partake in, right? That's the idea that you're partaking, you're also involved in it, right? And the other thing we talked about that let's say the animal's dead now, the animal, if nizik was $1,000, it's dead now. Now it's dead, it's worth $100. If by the time the nizik has to deal with it, by the time he takes it to market, it's not worth $100 anymore. It's decomposed and it's messed up, and it's only worth $50. That's also, he partakes in that thing too. In other words, he's got to pay partially too. All this we'll see in Gemara. Now, my shum adayan. What do we? My shum kesef. What do we mean by that? My shum kesef. Amavira shum ze lo yela bekesef. In other words, when the damage is assessed, it's got to be assessed for money, for value. We know, how do we judge everything? How much is it worth? How much is it worth? You don't say, I have a house and you have a house. Let's exchange houses. You got to see what they're worth. I mean, same thing here. Tanina, our mission, which says shum kesef, it tells you it's got to be assessed. It's a proof that so we live the Bryce. Let's say the para, right, wrecked a fancy garment, right? He tore into a fancy garment or stepped on it or ripped it up in some way. And the garment at the same time hurt the animal. He got tangled in there and strangled or whatever. Something happened to him. You don't say, well, let's set them off. My garment, which shouldn't have been in the street, damaged your animal, and your animal damaged my part. Let's call it even. You don't call it even. You see how much each one was worth. Maybe the garment was worth $10,000 and the part was worth $100, or vice versa. We don't know. You got to you figure out. In other words, you figure out who did more damage to the other guy. That's how you do it. You don't just say, well, we have damage and you have damage, so let's set it off. You don't say it. You have to evaluate. You have to assess it. Shava kesef, the value of money. What do you mean? A ton of rabbanan. Shava kesef. Malamed she'ein bezdin niskaken al chasim. Shava kesef means that bezdin's only recourse is to nechasim sheish lamachrayis. Sheish lamachrayis mean things that are obligations, meaning property, real estate. Chasim sheish lamachrayis means real estate. So the Tanur goes malamed she'ein bezdin niskaken. Bezdin, in other words, when bezdin goes to try to collect money for damages done, and one person owes money to another, defendant owes money to the plaintiff, can only go after real estate, right? Because other stuff we don't know. We don't know what it is, how much it's. Even if you know what it's worth, maybe it's meshubah to somebody else. We don't know, but property we know. But let's say the nizik didn't wait for court, and he went and he grabbed some of the metaltlin. Bezdin can't go and take away the metaltlin. But if, let's say, the nizik went and grabbed the metaltlin first, Bezdin go below man. Bezdin could say, okay, you can keep that. If he took it anyway, Bezdin won't go in, and Bezdin will only go and make an assessment and call out the bailiffs and collect. Basically, Bezdin will only collect from real estate. But if the nizik already collected from metalton, Bezdin can confirm that. How do you see that Shava Kesef refers to real estate? How do you see that? I'll tell you why. Something that's worth any amount of money. What's the idea of real estate? Real estate is like a blind item. Whatever you paid for it, it's worth there, right? Because mind you, right? What are we talking about? Means Shava Kesef that's worth any amount of money. If I have a pair of tefillin that's worth, whatever it's worth, $1,000, $2,000, not worth $1 million. But if I have real estate and I sell for $1 million, maybe it's worth $1 million. Whatever it's worth, whatever people will pay. So how do you see that? So it's Shava Kesef, it's worth any money. Mind you, what does it mean? Something where there's no fraud or deception involved, right? But if that's the case, the rule is slaves, and if you sell a shtar, also there's no there. If you're saying there's okay, and would you say that that's Shava Kesef too? The Bezdin would collect from slaves or documents? Would Bezdin agree to that too? Elam or Rabban, it can't be that. If you're saying it's real estate, why is real estate called Shava Kesef? Because it's worth any amount of money because there's no fraud there, but there's no fraud on Avadim and Shtaros also. That's not the rule. Elam or Bar Ula Davar Nikna Bekesef. Something which is acquired with Kesef. Shava Kesef means something which is acquired with Kesef. And real estate's acquired with Kesef. But Avadim Shtaros Nami Nikna Bekesef. Avadim Shtaros are also acquired with Kesef. Rashi says Shtaros Nikna Bekesef. It's not clear where that's from, but the Rabbi Kiva go at the bottom there, and the Gilin Hashaz brings down the Gemara and Brachos. He goes into it over there. In any case, Avadim Shtaros are also Nikna Bekesef. So how do you see that the word Shava Kesef, something that's worth money, refers to real estate? How do you know it's worth real estate? If it's because something that's worth any amount of money, where there's no fraud involved, there's no deception, whatever somebody paid for it, you say Avadim Shtaros also have that characteristic that there's no fraud there. And if you say it's something that's acquired with money, Avadim Shtaros also acquired with money. Elam or Ravashi Shava Kesef below Kesef. I'll tell you what it is. Meaning you could only pay, Bezdin would only assess or collect from something that's worth money, but not money itself. Not money itself. Why? Listen to this. All these other things, metaltlin, are all money themselves. Rashi is Omer Rashi, Shava Kesef and across Bachimash, but Shor Kesef Yishal, Shor Shava Kesef Yishal below Kesef Asmo. Hani Kulim, metaltlin, Avadim Shtaros, everything else that's other than real estate, whether it's movables, slaves, shtaros, they're all considered money. The Muslim Tumi, Muslims, you could sell it somewhere else. What do we really mean by that? That's really money. We think of money as cash, right? You have dollars, you have shekels, cash. But the truth is, I once saw this, it's a good interpretation of what is money. How do you define money? What is money? Money in different countries is different things, right? Money is defined as the most liquid asset in a given place and time. You know that there are times when a depression or where, the government said this money's no money anymore, right? I have some money we found from 1990, those old shekels, they're worth nothing. They're not worth anything. What makes it worth something? Because that's what's liquid right now. That's what people are used. If you get to a point, you get to a point, the thing that's most liquid, people don't even want cash anymore. They only want credit cards or whatever, right? So it's the item that's most liquid. So that's what that's really what the Gemara is saying over here. You want something that's worth money, but not money. Metalton is money. You could always use it as exchange. You can barter. You could do stuff like that. The only thing that's really not money is real estate. That's worth money, but it's not money. You can't take it somewhere else and spend it. You can't pick up and move. Anything you pick up is really money. So that's what he means. It means it's got to be real estate. So Bezdin will only collect from real estate. What do you mean? Our mission is to only collect from real estate. Bezdin only has recourse, which is real estate, as we've explained. I have a tiny yashuv so you can pay with anything. You do damage. Said yashuv includes anything. Even brand, even coarse stuff, even garbage. You can pay with whatever you have. Yes, you can collect for damages with anything, not just real estate. Here we're talking about when you collect from yisomim. When you collect from orphans, you can only take real estate because real estate belonged to their father, and that you can go after. You can't collect from a talflin, explains Rashi, of Yisomim, because you don't know when they got it. Let's say the father died and he left an obligation. He damaged somebody, he owed somebody money. You can't collect from Yisomim's metalflin. He said, what? We bought this stuff out of our own money right now. We went to work and we can't take from Yisomim. It's going to be Yasmi. Yasmi can only collect from real estate that the father had. He'd be Yasmi. If we're talking about real estate, talking about the orphans, you said what? You said in the Brisa that Bezdin can only go after real estate when it comes to damages. But if the damaged party collected Natalfin, Bezdin can confirm that. They won't take it away from him. Why? If it's from Yisomim, you would take it away. If he asked me, am I Bezdin Govin, why would Bezdin collect in him? The answer is Karamara, like Rav Nachman says elsewhere in Subish, Shetasim Chaim, speaking where he grabbed that's speaking about where they grabbed the talfin while the father was still alive from the father. But you really can't collect from Yisomim. But when he says over here, Shava Kesed, go look at from real estate, we're talking about Yisomim. Otherwise, if you're talking about damage, you collect from everybody. B'fnei Bezdin, what does it mean for Bezdin? Prat l'mochen achasav yachka cholach Bezdin. In other words, he's got to be able to, you have to collect from a guy when he has money. This is exclude a case where a person sold all his assets and then he goes to Bezdin and he says, I got nothing paid. So what do you mean? How can that work? Shmamah, you're going to tell me love on mochen achasav yachka cholach Bezdin. If what? If a man borrowed money from a creditor, and then he sold all his assets. So when he borrowed the money, he had assets to pay it back, and the malva had a lien on those assets. Then he sold his assets, and then he comes to Bezdin, I got no money. That works. Of course, they can collect from the malva. The malva can collect from the lokeach, the person who bought the property from the loba who borrowed money and then sold all his assets. That doesn't make any sense. We're talking here, you have to collect in front of a Bezdin. You have to go to a Bezdin who can make a proper assessment and also who can don dini knossos, because Chatzi Nezek, we're going to see later on as machlokas, whether you have to pay, it's really, is it money or is it money that, is it really a principal or is it a fine? In other words, we said Karen, right? A Karen that damages in Rosh Hashanah. In Rosh Hashanah, we said it's machlokas of Dapim, they're bunnet. If a Karen damages, if an animal, the first time he goes out, he was just born last week, goes out and he kicks, does damage to some animal in the street, pays Chatzi Nezek. Why Chatzi Nezek? Is it because he really should pay the whole thing, but that Torah gave him a break the first 3 times? The Torah says, you can only pay half, right? So is it you give him a break the first time, but he really owes the whole thing? Or do you say, no, it's not normal for an animal to do that. The first 3 times he's not chayiv at all, except just to make sure that the owner keeps an eye on him. We're going to give a knas and pay half. The nafkamin would be if moda knas is potter, but also the nafkamin is that only a bezin can don and dinei knasos. So he means to say over here, the Mishnah says shum kesef. We said it has to be an assessment. Shava kesef, you pay with real estate if you're collecting from Yisomim. It's got to be in front of a bezin. El prat bezin ados. You have a bezin who are mumchim, who know how to make assessments and can don dinei knasos. I'll pay him. When you make a collection, only if the demand, if the Adim came and were mechayiv you. But if it's a knas like Chatzi Nezek, and if you owe the Chatzi Nezek is a knas, and then Adim came afterwards, and you're potter because you were moda knas is potter. That's good if you owe moda knas Adim is potter. So fine. So you say Al Pi Adim is excluding that case. It's only if the Adim were mechayiv you. But if you were moda yourself, even if Adim came later on, mechayiv you're potter. Maybe he knew Adam were going to come, so he was motive first to try to get out of it. He owes you chayiv anyway. So what do you mean Al Pi Adam? What do you mean? What are you coming to exclude Al Pi Adam? Of course, it's with Adam. You can't say it's coming to exclude the case of motive of Kanas Adam because you're chayiv there anyway. You need Adam there anyway. What are you going to say there? If you hold motive Kanas Adam is chayiv, what does Al Pi Adam come to exclude? Say you're not really not that you're chayiv Al Pi Adam. Of course, you're only chayiv Al Pi Adam. Nobody else can be chayiv you money. Everything is with Adam. Whether it's Dinei Ever, here we're talking about Dinei Mamonos and Zika, of course with Adam. It's come to the safest because it says Al Pi Adam. It says Al Pi Adam b'nei chor b'nei bris. B'nei chor b'nei bris is going not just on the chiyuvim that we talked about in the first mission. The first mission we said has to be b'nei bris. The mission on Testament Bay said what? That they have to be chutz mazik. It said there that it has to be the chasim shein shel b'nei bris. The assets have to be. Here we're talking about the Adam. The Adam have to be b'nei chor or b'nei bris. B'nei chorin free lemute avadim, can't be avadim. Even if Eviknani is a half a Jew, he can't be a witness here. B'nei bris lemute have to come to exclude goyim. That's true. So why do I have to exclude both? V'yashmin an eved mishum dein lo yachas. An eved has no lineage, he has no legal pedigree, right? So there, maybe he can't be an aid in a case of damages. Avol nachri yesh lo yachas. He has yachas after his father, like the Psukim tell us in Tanakh. What is it? But Hadan, Bar Hadad, whatever. Goyim have a yachas according to their father. They have a lineage. Maybe he could testify in court when it comes to damages. Of course, not for Gittin and Kedushin and Dini Erva and Nashim, but for money matters, maybe he could. For Mashmalon, it's got to be no. It has to be Eidim b'nei Chorna b'nei. Yesh many nachrim mishum lo shach mitzvahs no mitzvahs. I've left the shach mitzvahs. He has mitzvahs like a woman. I think he's not excluded Sricha. Therefore, the Mishnah has to tell us that there's no chiddush the word Eidim. The chiddush is in that the Eidim have to be b'nei Chorna and b'nei bris. All right, we'll pick up from the 2 dots tomorrow. Mr. Hashem. Have a good day, everybody. Surot Tov. In what sense? That they could be nicknamed with kesef and shtar,
but not here.
But not that you can collect from a bottom. In other words, when you say bezin can collect from yisomim, only karka. That's the chasam sheish lamachrais. But a bottom like shtars can be nicknamed with kesef shtar. You too. Call too.